This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to What the Health, an independent approach to your health span. Have you noticed how our healthcare system may not have your best interest in mind? Join Dr. Eckel in this fun and sometimes disturbing exploration of the state of healthcare and what it means for you. Now, here's your host, Dr. Eckel.
All right, welcome back, everybody. This is What the Health, and I am Dr. Greg Eckel, and I have a treat for you all. And I know I say that about every week, but today truly is a treat because we've got Dr. Jonathan Nadal on the show, and he is my lead physician at Nature Cures, and I'm so excited to introduce him to you all. And in particular, this topic, we cooked this up called brain fog, and we're going to talk about differential diagnosis and conditions, considerations in tackling this all too common symptom, from mitochondrial dysfunction to neuroinflammation, viruses, Lyme, and mold. Oh my. So I want to give you a little bit of a background. Dr. Nadal earned his doctorate in Naturopathic Medicine and a master's in Science in Oriental Medicine from the National University of Natural Medicine. That was a 6-year concurrent program, included 3 years of internship at NUNM, main clinic, and community clinics throughout Portland. He has advanced training in functional medicine and regenerative medicine, completed a 1-year mentorship in 5-element acupuncture and biotherapeutic drainage. He spent several rotations in an interdisciplinary clinic from Pacific University, which focused on a variety of mental health conditions, along with treating underserved populations in downtown Portland. Jonathan was born and raised in Miami, Florida, where the sunshine and the ocean left a lifelong love for being immersed in nature. Earned a B of A in psychology from Florida International University, where he placed an emphasis in applied behavior analysis and industrial and organizational psychology. When he's not practicing medicine, you can find Jonathan behind his drum set playing in local Portland bands. Dr. Nadal, welcome aboard.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Dr. Eckel.
Yeah, you are welcome. And like I said, I'm really excited to introduce you to the What the Health community. You know, you've been doing a lot of the heavy lifting at Nature Cures these days. And I wanted to branch out and introduce you to our online community. And one question I wanted to start with, I always like for people to understand, like, why did you get into medicine?
Oof, yeah. You know, I've always thought about this since I was younger, and especially over the years, the more that we practice, there's more time to reflect and kind of contemplate. And, you know, I related to both my mom and my aunt, just some of the people closest to me in my life in my early 20s, going through a lot of just undiagnosed health issues, autoimmune conditions. And it was particularly frustrating because I was studying pre-med and super excited to follow, we'll call it the more traditional route. But I have to take it back before that. When I was a kid, like 5 to the age of like 13 or so, I had really, really bad asthma. And so to the point where I was hospitalized almost every other month. Wow. So yeah, just growing up, I was always immersed one way or another in the healthcare system, in hospitals, in and out of doctors' offices. So it's something I was kind of just familiar with and blindly trusted in. And then as I went through school, studying psychology, then pre-med, and getting excited about that, and then simultaneously seeing the struggles that modern medicine had in diagnosing and figuring out what was going on with my mom and my aunt, it became really frustrating. And it's almost like the bubble bursted. And I wondered what else was out there. So I started, and this was back in Florida. You know, naturopathic medicine isn't as popular, or it wasn't back then in Florida. So I started digging, you know, the acupuncture was a lot more prevalent. So I drifted towards that and just trying to find other alternative forms of medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, you name it. And I had some friends out here in Portland, and they told me about NCNM. So I started looking into naturopathic medicine and realized that it was a lot more than just herbs and homeopathy. It was a full-on medical school curriculum, right? And at the time, it was maybe 5 schools throughout the country, but Portland looked pretty exciting.
Nice.
So yeah, I finished off with pre-med and psychology, and that was great, but then just explored my options and applied and came out here, and I'm so glad that I chose this path.
I am so glad, and our patients are so glad you chose this path too. You know, it's always interesting to hear the circuitous route into naturopathic medical school, because a lot of folks have never heard of it before.
Right.
And so that's good. You had some friends locally that said, hey, check out this school.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really awesome. And so through your own, basically your own health journey and then family's health journey,
Right.
got a little bit disillusioned with the way things were, maybe not getting served in such a big way. So
Right.
looking for your own alternatives. Did you have like early experiences with alternative medicine or complementary medicine that kind of put more wind in the sails, or did you just kind of jump in all in when you did the research?
Yeah, both. It's a good question, because even as I started getting into my teens, like as I started exercising more and just being mindful of what made my body not feel well as far as food, I noticed that, I mean, I grew out of the asthma somehow. Which can happen, but I feel like exercise and a little bit of nutrition had something to do with it, you know, and I kind of left that alone. But then years later, once again, with my aunt and mom, seeing what I was scrambling around trying to put together, where it was through nutrition or things that they could do, I realized that there was a lot more that could be done other than just guesswork and doing different medications that ultimately made them feel worse.
Sure.
So in my own kind of reaching through the dark, trying to figure out what they could do, yeah, there was some natural, more integrative approaches that I knew were out there.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we have a doozy of a topic here. It's pretty nefarious and ubiquitous, which is this concept of brain fog. And it's something we hear clinically all the time.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could tell us, like, well, what is it? Because it's not like you can put your finger on that.
Yeah, good question. It's the type of thing where, you know, if you look at different diagnostic texts, and it's not a condition necessarily, right? It's more something that manifests in a variety of different conditions and situations. You know, it's more of a constellation of symptoms that could be going on in the body, in the brain. You know, it's very close to overall fatigue. You know, there's, if anything, if any label that's close enough to it, there's things like chronic fatigue syndrome, right? Yeah. Which is its own nebulous of like, okay, what do we do to test it, to treat it, right? So I feel like brain fog is the kind of the mental brain equivalent to that, you know? Would you agree?
Well, yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it, because it is oftentimes it will go with that. You know, I've heard patients talk about like cotton candy in their ears, or just kind of a thick soup that, or a heaviness that comes on their head, which you could really attribute into a fatigue state as well.
Yeah.
So what could be causing that? Like, it is oftentimes we're hearing it more and more with the brain fog, and sometimes there's attentional issues that go along with that, like inability to concentrate, stay focused, just even think creatively. It's like there's a literal fog on the brain of just, it's not functioning well. So kind of in the differential, how do you think about a brain fog situation? Somebody come in.
Yeah, good. So, I mean, I like to, you know, it's you start from the forest and then work your way through the trees, you know, especially if you're meeting a patient for the first time. Just being a good ND, just following the foundations of health to start with, right? Making sure that sleep, nutrition, movement, intellectual stimulation, that all that is as best as it could be, because it doesn't matter what type of medications or tests we run. If those things aren't set, it's going to be hard to move the needle. That's just standard, that's foundational, right? But from there, we can work from the top to bottom. Like, so when we talk about nutrition and absorption, assimilation, okay, let's start thinking about the gut, right? With the whole gut-brain axis. And then from there, we can consider things like neuroinflammation. Is that happening? Are there migraines or headaches that are happening constantly due to some toxicity? So depending on what other symptoms are going on, we can kind of get a sense to where we can pivot and figure out what might be causing the brain fog, right?
Yep.
And then, of course, I mean, being out here in the Northwest, I mean, we think about other things like mold or Lyme, kind of environmental things that might slip below the radar and have gone undiagnosed, which is a shame. And that could be hiding behind the scenes too.
Got it. Yeah. So, and those are really, we're putting those in a second tier. I like how you've kind of delineated there, where you start with the foundations. And then you can get into the weeds a bit. You know, oftentimes we are seeing mold or Lyme, but that's not our starting spot. You know, I think a lot of patients will come in off their internet research and saying, I have mold or I have Lyme. And then we find, well, you're just not sleeping. You know, you're eating simple carbohydrates. Your diet isn't adequate. So I think I love that approach, is starting with the basics, the foundations, and then really building from there, because there is a logical route to kind of work through it. Not that it's just all an algorithm, but that there is first things first.
Right. Absolutely. And then there are some, you know, even though if you look through the CDC and WHO, like fine, there aren't specific objective diagnostic tests, which is frustrating to hear, for things like that fall under brain fog or chronic fatigue. But guess what? I mean, yeah, we can run CBC, CMP, check out thyroid function, and even some of the more functional labs just to check adrenal function, adrenal health. If the endocrine system isn't running up to par, then we know the nervous system and everything else is not going to be working optimally too, right? Sure. So it's kind of as deep as we need to get.
Yeah, so those, for folks listening, Dr. Nadal just listed off a bunch of these are basic blood panels. There's nothing exotic about a CBC, which is a complete blood count. CMP is a comprehensive metabolic panel, a test for your kidney function, your liver function, electrolyte balance, how's your gallbladder working, things like that. So those are really just standard panels, but you can get a ton of information as to, what's going on with the blood chemistry for folk. What can mimic the brain fog? Because sometimes there are some, red herrings out there, or, some, different rabbit holes that you actually do need to explore with people. What have been some surprises for you in a brain fog, the patient presenting with brain fog?
Yeah, it's as varied as the patients, right? I mean, it can be, like you said, I mean, if let's say there's something as simple as like a B12 or some type of nutrient deficiency, and that relates to maybe some underlying GI condition that they haven't even had symptoms for, even things like Crohn's or celiacs. But then it could be, on the flip side of that, things that need to be ruled out if there are more neurological symptoms, things as far as like MS even can present with brain fog, right? So
sure.
Doing a thorough workup, family history and past medical history to make sure that someone's not thinking they just have brain fog, and then 5-10 years later they go on to develop something more serious and we could have caught it early on, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah. And what do you think is the underlying driver, regardless of the diagnosis, let's say, but why that symptom? How does this show up, or what's your thought process on that?
So neuroinflammation, I know inflammation's huge in the whole body, but once it starts actually impacting the nervous system, where it literally is not firing optimally and correctly, and then considering mitochondrial health, and then even to take it further into the actual integrity of the membranes and the lipid bilayers within the brain. If we're not improving the conductivity and reducing the inflammation in the brain, it doesn't matter what's going on behind the scenes. We're not going to get to the root of it.
Right. Yeah. So that neuroinflammation is the underlying kind of mechanism there. This is exactly why I created that nasal spray, Clear Mind nasal spray.
Right.
Now I'm getting ahead of what to do about it, but let's talk about who tends to get it, population demographics, and we're hearing a lot more about brain fog with the COVID long haulers,
Yes.
Which is actually a small percentage of people that actually get COVID and recover. So the way that the news portrays it, it's like, millions of people, but it is a smaller percentage of people. And wondering, who tends to get brain fog? You talked about neuroinflammation, and talked about mitochondrial health, which, the mitochondria is such a buzz term these days as we learn more and more about those little miraculous energy factories of our bodies.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, so, from tip of the iceberg, just to address in order kind of what you were saying, in general, we find, so if we think about the subset of the population that is finding themselves not performing optimally or have been used to performing optimally, and all of a sudden their brain isn't working the same way, we may not hear that as much from a 12 or 15-year-old, even though it's possible. But I'm finding more anywhere from 25 to 30 up to like 50 or 55 years old. We find the most, like, I think, the brain fog we're talking about.
Yeah.
That being said, of course, as we age, 65, 70, of course, there's the possibility for overall cognitive decline and a whole other variety of conditions. But the broader arc of concern here that we're addressing in general, as far as brain fog, I would say anywhere from 25 to about 55, where simultaneously there's some of the biggest stressors in life, right? You're getting into adulthood, figuring out your career, maybe figuring out family, moving, dealing with parents. All these things are kind of the big picture events that are just weighing in and demanding from every angle. So I feel like that's the biggest subset of the population where we might run into this.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, during pregnancy, we can't forget the more common non-pathological, like women during pregnancy or even menopause, there'll be some brain fog because there is a real underlying hormonal component to it as well.
Got it.
That being said, your mention about kind of the COVID long haulers, the most recent research, I thought, I mean, it's maybe 15 to 20% of patients that actually went on to deal with COVID. Months later, even after other symptoms disappear, there might be some lingering brain fog. And there's different reasons for it. It seems like when they do autopsies and kind of go backwards and realize that in some of the nervous system tissue, there may not be any more viral particles or anything like that, but the type of inflammation that happened in the nervous system is lingering and was due to COVID. So yeah, there's that. And then the very real stress of actually dealing with COVID is just going to dysregulate cortisol, the fight or flight hormone. And we know that when cortisol is dysregulated, inflammation is no longer under control. So from that point, we're getting kind of two directions that are adding up and making things worse. So yeah, it gets into a pretty nasty loop, like in and out through COVID, as far as brain fog and that kind of fatigue. And there's ways out of it, just figuring out what domino started the whole thing.
Yeah. Love it. So on that front, is it urgent to treat brain fog? So why is it important to address?
I would say it's extremely important. A lot of symptoms, and I'm sure you can second this, a lot of folks, if they have a little cough or a little stomach ache or their pinky hurts, they're not going to bother with the doctor, but because it may not impact their day-to-day living. But once something is directly impacting them like that, like brain fog, if they're underperforming at work, if they can't just keep up with things, if life is looking different and brain fog is impacting them, it probably means that it's been impacting them for long enough where something else is going on and they need to figure it out. It's one manifestation of a potentially deeper underlying cause.
Yeah.
So that's why ultimately.
Got it. Yeah, it is. This is not one that we see that people tolerate very well, as they should not. It is a symptom that when your brain is not functioning, you notice it, right?
Right.
And it colors all the rest of our lives. When you're not able to access your frontal lobe, your creativity, your inspiration, it definitely will kind of blanket your enjoyment of life and your energy overall. Right. And so that aspect of the underlying fatigue. So we talked about the neuroinflammation. Really, it is a sign of that. And then the mitochondrial health. So maybe speak into mitochondrial health, because this, our listeners and viewers have heard the concept on what the health from different variety of speakers, but not so much in light of brain function, and when we're talking about brain fog in particular.
Yeah, excellent. So mitochondria, they're the energy houses of the cell. In another way, I just call them the engine within the cell. A lot of some of the most important functions are revved up through the mitochondria, but this is every single cell in your body, every cell. Now, especially our brain cells, they demand a lot of energy, right? So, I mean, when we think about the cascade of effects of what mitochondrial dysfunction could mean, we think about, yes, fatigue, brain fog, but, even undiagnosed hypothyroidism for long enough might have its underpinnings in overall mitochondrial dysfunction, right? So we think about some of the nutrients that mitochondria need, and it's a good variety of antioxidants and having the right amount of minerals in our body and our diet, or even through supplementation, and optimizing that in order to make sure that we're getting the right mitochondrial support that we need, especially in the busy, fast-paced world that we're in and stressful world that we're in, where it's going to tax our cells and our nutrients and antioxidants and probably rob our mitochondria of the health that they need to perform optimally, right?
Wow. Yeah, that's a great way of putting that. Is there a way of measuring that?
Yes. Yeah. In particular, I mean, just getting a sense of overall, even what you mentioned, like seeing different electrolyte levels, that's important. A lot of the T4, T3, like some of the thyroid hormones, once they get into the cell, they're kind of like some of the gasoline that contributes to overall energy production. They're kind of contributing to the respiration of the cell, which will lead to and connect with the mitochondria. But just one of the more straightforward, I mean, I really like what used to be called the comprehensive metabolic analysis profile. I think it goes by the organic acids tests.
Sure.
And that gives us just a really good in-depth analysis of all the things that go into augmenting mitochondrial health. And it's an easy test. And it's just, one of another of the more advanced functional labs that we do offer here.
Nice. Well, let's talk about specific workups and labs that go in. I know it's a huge topic here, but one of the things that I've really been enjoying doing lately is the Intellex DNA, looking at the genomics, and in particular for thyroid function in the brain. And we've been able to turn folks' brains on if they have a specific SNP in their genetic profile with giving just free, T3, the active thyroid hormone, can be enough just to wake them up. Not treating their thyroid, but treating them with thyroid medication to increase metabolism and energetics in the brain. And it's been nothing short of miraculous for some patients.
Yes. Awesome. Yeah, precisely. I mean, we got that. And then in the mix, you probably already discussed a little bit of the plasmalogens that we're excitedly looking into.
Oh, we have not. So let's put that all in here.
Excuse me. Yeah. Okay. There's just so many things that go into brain health that it's hard to keep the door closed on it, But So as far as the way that we'd work it up, we brought up some of the things. I mean, the metabolic profiles, like some of the annual screens, right, that we see in the blood work. If we see that even like some of the the immune cell markers, if they're a little bit off, maybe we see if it suggests that maybe there's some underlying viral infection, right?
Yeah.
And if that's off, then that'll cue us into maybe checking out some of the viral titers, right? So it's kind of like there is a pecking order to it, right? So from routine kind of annual blood work, dialing down to assessing the endocrine system, I really love the test kit bundle that we run with some patients.
Sure.
That Dutch hormone analysis is huge, not just in addressing cortisol and DHEA and all that, just because we know that cortisol, the fight or flight hormone, like I mentioned already, if it's dysregulated, that means that inflammation is going to be just kind of rampant in the body. But the Dutch hormone test also tells us about different neurotransmitter metabolites. So we get a sense of what's going on with things like B12, glutathione, dopamine, and all that. So all those can be contributing to potential underlying causes of brain fog. And the GI maps too, just to figure out what microbiomes are, like what microbial environment is going on in the gut, to help figure that out too.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've mentioned already, just heavy metal testing, right?
Yeah.
Figure out all of this and there's no infection and everything is optimized, but is there some heavy metal burden that our patients might be dealing with that's going to interfere with it, right?
Yeah, I really like that as a triad starting spot for most people coming in with neurodegeneration, brain health issues, brain fog, in addition to any of their annual exams. And right. I guess just a public service announcement, I am hearing from people their annual screening measures are getting canceled again because of Delta variant on the rise. I want to encourage people to, really push on the system. Like you owe it to yourselves to get the metrics on an annual basis, because some of these things, when you miss them, they can go way off really quickly. And that's why we have annual exams. So I want to make sure people are getting their annual exams with their provider, having that relationship. Even if you're not sick, right? That's a best time to go in is when you are well. Talk about your health concerns. Get blood work. Even if they say, oh, well, you're fine, you don't need blood work this year. It's like, no. Get the blood work. Get the blood work, because it's one blood work is just one blood work. You want a serial measurement through time. So we use that, what you get with your, current local provider, and then kind of our test kits that we can send right to your house. And then we can put together a bigger picture and program for you. And, you name the test, we can work it up. So it was a little bit not fair of me to say, well, how, give us the litany of tests that you're going to do, Doc. One of the things that I really appreciate about you is that you think and you listen. And oftentimes when people are going to integrated practitioners, they get the massive workup, but the doctor or provider isn't really thinking. They're testing and they're going to treat labs, and it's just really not reality. If, what I find, and what you're a great example of this, is when the provider has presence in the room or on the Zoom with somebody, you hear what the path is that we need, right? Yes. You see, it kind of lines up. It's really amazing how that happens. And so having the trusted guide in your healthcare is really an important piece of the puzzle. It's not just an algorithm. I mean, when people get on Dr. Google, it's like, oh my gosh, I have cancer, right?
Yeah.
On brain fog in particular. So I'm wondering, you covered kind of the basics of labs. I'm wondering in the differential now, you went through it a couple times around fatigue and neuroinflammation, and you said, well, here are some main causes of brain fog. What do you see clinically as kind of some of the most common causes of brain fog?
Most commonly, so the patients that are coming in here, overworked, stressed, tired, multitasking, family life, and maybe something happened 10, 15 years ago, like, oh, by the way, kind of thing, where they were diagnosed with this, whether it's hypothyroidism, or I was dealing with a really bad viral infection for several weeks or several months that went away. And then they realized, oh, I haven't really thought clearly ever since that. That's probably the most common manifestation or presentation with that, I would say. Basically things that happened a while before that was kind of swept under the rug, and then now they just can't deal with it anymore. They forget where it started to begin with until you dig a little deeply. And that relates to what you're saying, just being present and kind of getting into the story and figuring out, well, when did this happen? And when was your life lived differently, so that we can figure out what happened, right?
Yeah. In addition to, on the assessment, oftentimes folks want to know, well, like, what are the biggest lever movers? Like, what can I push on here? Obviously, it's different depending on what the cause is. But in clinic, maybe I want you to speak into the acupuncture component that you are an expert in. Because a lot of folks may have not heard of the 5-element branch of acupuncture. So I'm wondering, because it's pretty unique in how it addresses the emotions and underlying causes of illness. So, I wonder if you could go into that a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah. So what I love about 5-element acupuncture, I mean, there's so many different styles of acupuncture, and they all have their special nuanced ways of approaching different manifestations of illness. But what I love about 5-element is that it really, really, in particular, the Worsley style 5-element, it's very individualized in how it goes in, addresses any, the potential, we call it CF, like causative factor, and just figure out what has been, if we'll say, like the energetic blueprint in this person that has gone off, over the last few years, that has resulted in these, almost like these trends, these patterns towards certain symptoms or signs that happen every few years, every few months. It's almost like everyone has their tendencies, You ever hear of someone, if they get sick, like, oh, it always goes to my lungs, or, oh, my stomach will always get nauseous. Like, everyone kind of has their direction, right?
Yeah.
And so everyone has their direction of pathology, or there's also, what is it, like salutogenesis? Like, everyone has their potential direction towards health, right? And so the unique role in 5-element is kind of seeing what's beneath both of those and bringing it back in a direction of bringing about health, while also dealing with whatever disease process is going on in the person. Because two people with the same CF might have completely different diseases or symptoms or signs. Instead of CF, let's say two people that
What is CF?
Yeah, like causative factor.
Okay.
Or let's say they're the greatest sphere of energetic influence behind the person. So if there's fire, metal, water, wood, all those elements in 5-element, there's going to be one or two elements that the person mostly resonates for, as far as the lens that we're looking through. This is not to limit or pigeonhole people by any means, because there's literally dozens of levels within that element that goes very specific and individualized. This is kind of just scratching the surface, because it's not right or fair to put patients into little, pigeonholes or like a sign, or
come on, really?
Well, we do better medicine than that, right? So at the end of the day, 5-element will dial it into one thing is the disease, and one thing is the underlying kind of genetic and environmental makeup of the person by virtue of these elements, and just the practice of a medicine that's existed for thousands of years, and the combination of points and clearing blockages to treatment or obstacles to cure, which we learn about both in acupuncture and naturopathic medicine, right? So even in 5-element acupuncture, there'll be several initial stages where we're just clearing the stage and addressing the foundational imbalances that need to be addressed before we can go on and actually treat the condition and more deeply treat the individual. Because we're not after just fixing the problem temporarily. We actually want to heal and treat the person as a whole. So ideally, they don't need to come back as often, right?
Love it. And what kind of breakthroughs have you seen? Like, given it for instance here, because it's still a little bit academic for folks listening on What the Health.
Yeah.
Do you have an example? I can think of one patient that I won't mention their name, but I referred over to you for the 5 elements, and kind of had a major breakthrough with anxiety and kind of a deep understanding of self. It was really impressive to see. So
it was.
Yeah. Does that ring a bell?
It does. It does. I know you're talking about, because that was pretty recent too. So it's like on our radar. Yeah. She, for years and years, I mean, lifelong of different traumatic events, especially over the last year or two, kind of just, in like the ability to fully engage and be present, not just with others, but I imagine with herself, and kind of facing things as she would need to, brilliant, creative individual, but you can tell it was kind of just like a shade or like a shadow that kind of cloaked around her, where she couldn't really see outward and engage with the world that she needed to. And I mean, clinically, sure, we can call it depression and anxiety, and it was. But at the end of the day, I think it was, even after the first 2 to 4 treatments, just once a week for a few weeks, it's almost like suddenly that the lights were turned on, where just the engagement, the communication, the eye contact, just even the energy in the room, when they're sitting there, this kind of this levity, right? And it's not just subjective, but even objectively, like performing better at work, like just feeling better in her relationships, feeling like she did decades ago when she went to therapy for years at a time. She felt that happen within a few weeks, so it can be a game changer for a lot of people.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the work is done through the patient and through me. I'm just a guy. I'm just a medium for it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Love it. All right. Well, and on other big lever movers for folks that we've seen through the years, right? And in particular for brain fog, obviously we've got all kinds of therapeutics in the clinic, which during a pandemic sometimes is a little bit difficult. And as we have expanded our reach globally, it's hard to deliver some of those things over the interwebs. But I would say the IV therapies that we do, especially around neuroinflammation, can be game changers. Yes. Whether they be multivitamin mineral drips or NAD, even high dose vitamin C in a post-viral syndrome situation, because that's really what long haul COVID is just post-viral syndrome. And we, you name the virus, there's a post-viral syndrome.
Right.
And so those, the acupuncture that we're talking about, hyperbaric oxygen, flooding the brain full of oxygen, is another amazing putting the neuroinflammation out therapeutic. For that one, it is really hours in the tank. You just need to get a certain set number of hours. You can't just camp out in there, but you want to get, around. Paul Harsh is the doc who has done a tremendous amount of research in that field. And he writes about 32 hours at the minimum of starting to see the benefits of the hyperbaric. So it is time in the tank, time intensive therapy, but also very potent at bringing back somebody's brain from traumatic brain injury, which also has a lot of brain fog associated with it, to MS, to just post-viral syndrome. That's a biggie. Any other big levers come to mind for you?
No, I mean, those are solid and important, and really effective. Let's see. I mean, so even with that being limited, kind of, I know that if folks can invest in some of the, even the like pulsed electromagnetic frequency, just helping reduce inflammation overall,
Yeah.
and then optimizing brain health simultaneously. And let's not forget food as well, right?
Right.
As far as things they could do at home. Yeah.
You know, oftentimes one of those overlooked things for brain fog is gluten sensitivity.
Yes.
And I wanted to bring that up here. You know, we have talked on multiple occasions about neuroinflammation with Dr. Tom O'Brien on this show. But the amount of, you know, even if you don't, you know, I'm not talking about celiac disease, which is an actual genetic disorder where you cannot digest gluten. Just the general population, you'll get like 4 to 6 hours of inflammation after ingesting gluten.
Yeah.
Now, that may be coming from glyphosate, in particular, the amount of pesticides on the wheat in the United States, because we have patients that go over to Italy and they have no issues, right?
Right, right.
But it is, one, they have different varietals of wheat, and two, they don't have the glyphosate or the pesticide exposure on the grain. But that causes inflammation of the gut, which then goes up and causes inflammation of the brain. So the blood-brain barrier, the BBB, also gets inflamed, and then we're talking about neuroinflammation. The food, you know, we give all new patients a diet diary, right? And I like to say there's no judgment from us, so be brutally honest on it.
Right.
And we color code that for macronutrients, because oftentimes, you know, I'm seeing omega-3 fatty acid deficiencies and essential amino acid deficiencies. So these are called essential, as essentially you cannot make them in your body. You can only get them from your food. So that goes back to that foundational discussion. So let's, you know, in the kind of the wrapping it up phase, let's give them the foundation way of thinking about brain fog. And then we'll talk about maybe some simple testing things to think about. And then we'll talk about next steps.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, from beginning, middle to end. I love it. So, I mean, yeah, foundations, sleep, everyone needs a different amount, whether it's 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, just make sure you're getting it. Quality sleep. There's a bunch of different biohacks now to monitor, you know, REM versus deep sleep. That can be really useful. You know, treating your body more like a temple than an amusement park, right? Making sure that you're balancing it out, you know, even if there's drinking, to not drink later on in the evening, because that'll affect the quality of your sleep. Making sure nutrition is on par, plenty of just eating a rainbow, right? As far as colorful fruits and veggies that are rich in antioxidants, your brain loves it and needs it. And like you were saying, healthy amounts of essential fatty acids, omega-3s, cooking with the right oils, and just the right ratio of proteins to get those essential amino acids in. Definitely important. And then making a mental note, you know, if someone's dealt with some transient illness that went undiagnosed for a while, and then a few years later, you're just super tired and can't concentrate, maybe it's time to get it worked up. Starting with those routine annual, with that blood work, with those screens, it's huge. And even like you were saying, even if you can't get around to an appointment because of COVID, just really push for it. You know, we can definitely do that here.
So I do want to mention the plasmalogens, because you brought them up.
Sure.
We didn't really talk about them. And this is something, you know, I had Dr. Goodnow on the show a couple of weeks ago. Now, he was talking mainly about his research with Alzheimer's, but I've taken a deep dive into plasmalogens, and these are lipids that make up the phospholipid bilayer of all of our cells, and in particular in our brain. And I've been really impressed with, there are ways to rule out or rule in different cancer types, the peroxisome, the inflammasome. So we're measuring, he basically took, I believe, 13,000 different samples and put AI, artificial intelligence, on it to see what kind of patterns could come up. So he picked on Alzheimer's to start, and showing, if you can raise the plasmalogen level, if you're low in your blood, you'll increase your brain to the point of reversing Alzheimer's. So he's really on to something there. And it's something that we're putting in at Nature Cures for more and more people as a screening mechanism. So in addition to just the annual blood work, these are markers that don't typically get run for folks. So
yeah, absolutely. No, that's huge. And then, even besides, like, with this other blood work, making sure, ferritin, iron, checking thyroid levels, because like we were talking about, optimizing endocrine function, sometimes some clinical, subclinical hypothyroidism, or just low functioning adrenals might be behind the scenes as well. So some of those test kits that we were talking about, the Dutch hormone test, just to figure out adrenal health, making sure there's no heavy metal burden, GI maps, some of those more advanced functional labs that we do offer here. And we definitely incorporate that with a lot of the neurodegenerative patients. That's huge. Plasmalogens, all of it, even checking the mitochondrial health, like the one that we talked about.
Yes.
A few different directions to start with. And depending on what we find, we just dig deeper, right?
I love that. And just another plug on plasmalogens, they do have a mitochondrial health panel in that assay. So
great.
I'm excited to get back in there and share that information with you.
Awesome.
So then, okay, so that's the foundational work. There's some testing to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously we're seeing people, I am dismayed, let's say, on how broken our healthcare system is. I will give you my own story. I had to get some testing done through Providence here in Portland, Oregon. And you cannot get a hold of a real person. Yeah. It all happens online in MyChart. Well, it just so happened I got 2 MyCharts set up, and the only access to the MyChart that I have is the one that has no information in. So I get a call from clinician like, "Oh, I put some notes in your MyChart." I'm like, "Well, that doesn't do me any effing good because I can't get to it."
Right.
And I cannot get a real person to help fix it. And so it's like we're in this dystopia of, it's the time of COVID, like people need actual care.
Yeah.
And they can't get a hold of a live being to help them.
Yeah.
And we wonder what is going on. And so where I'm going with that is, we offer remote consults.
Yes. Because
we are taking a stand for people's health. And I put that link in the show notes for folks. It's, naturecuresclinic.com. You can find it right there on our website. It's /book-a-call, but it is right on our front page. We've redone the website to help people just navigate that and make it easier finding stuff as well. Are you seeing that at all, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's kind of a shame, like at a crisis, at a time like this, where society needs help in so many different ways, where we're met with so much opposition, and it is mind-boggling. And it makes me think about the world over, like, what's going on in every other country, or is just a special place? But yeah, it's frustrating that after so many attempts, even yourself, being a medical provider, and theoretically knowing some of the loops and the ways to get in to be able to speak to somebody somehow, right? And no, not even.
It really harkens back to 3 years ago when I went through it with Soraya, and I was just as dismayed then. Mm-hmm. And there has been no improvement with all of the connectivity. You'd think we'd have a better connection with providers or with the healthcare system. I recently did a AM Northwest where I was talking about healthy aging, and the US ranks number 38 in life expectancy. 38th in the world. And,
Wow.
we're not number one anymore. Like, that whole concept of, we're number one. It's like, no, we're 38th. And I just think, man, we spend 10, 20 times more than the next country on their health. But it's not on health, it's on disease and sick care management. So, kind of putting it out there, folks, if you got some good information in the show today, please think of 2 people and share this show with them. The brain fog is really ubiquitous and could change their lives. I wanted to introduce Dr. Nadal to everybody. This was a lot of fun. I'm wondering if you have any last parting wisdom for folks.
Yeah, just, given the current zeitgeist, like, just make sure that, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. Even the way Dr. Eckel mentioned, if you can't reach anybody, you're trying to find answers, you're frustrated, just know that you have 2 people right here that will actually stand up and advocate with you and actually care to talk to you, maybe even see you face to face on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
So we're here. It's kind of a call to arms, just to remind you that there are healthcare providers that actually still care and want to fight the good fight. Okay.
Nice. Yes, we are bringing the heart back into medicine, everybody. If you like today's show, please go out, give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. It does make a difference. Our listenership and viewership is growing every week, which warms my heart. It helps us get the message out. It's why I created this platform, What the Health. We are here on the Contact Talk Radio Tuesdays from 2 to 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We look forward to seeing you here next Tuesday. Take care, everybody.